Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Zenaton, and welcome to today's video, where this is going to be the July 2020 meta report for Legends of Runeterra. Um, it's been it's been a while. We've had a couple of patches since the June meta report I did a month ago. I believe it's 2 balance patches since then. The meta has shifted a lot since then, so let's not take too long. Let's get right into it. So, before we go into the individual decks, like last time, let's look at what I consider the current tiers. Tier 1, 2, and 3, I don't think there's anything good enough in my honest opinion to be at tier 0 at the moment. Tier 1, we still got Heimerdinger Vi up there. It's still a really good deck. It was able to dodge some nerfs. It got a recent nerf in the form of Solitary Monk going from 3 power to, or 4 power to 3 power. But that's it. And it's still really good. It's crazy, I know. Knox's Harrowing and Anivia Rekindler are newer decks that have shown up because of buffs. Very powerful decks. Karma Ezreal has made its way, in my opinion, up to tier 1 as an answer to both Heimerdinger Vi and Anivia Rekindler. It has good matchups against both of them, and it's not even that bad against Knox's Harrowing because it has Deny for Harrowing itself, and it has Eye of the Dragon to try its best to stabilize against the aggression, and all the good spot removal to actually kill units. Pretty decent. In tier 2, mostly this is where we see all of our mid-range stuff. We got Brom Swain, which is just a fairly mid-range deck. Demacia Bannerman of all types of variants, with the very aggressive type with Senna Lucian, more scout variants too. Just Demacia in general mid-range, aka Bannerman. We also got TF Ezreal. Not as good as... what's it called? Not as good as Karma Ezreal, but it's got advantages and pros and cons compared to Karma Ezreal. It's better against certain decks, where Karma Ezreal might be weak against certain decks. It's a very fun deck. I like it. Still, though, the lack of Deny and Will of Ionia hurt it overall compared to Karma Ezreal. Then we got Frostbite Mid-range, sometimes known as Frostbite Control, your standard Ashe Sejuani list, with lots of things like challengers, like Glory Seekers, and just big units in general, like Hearthguards, Yetis from Avarosan Trappers, Strafarian Assessors to keep the card engine going. It's pretty good still. It struggles a little bit against some of the tier 1 decks, but it's still pretty good. It's got a few good matchups. And in tier 3, we have just some old decks that are struggling to stay relevant. Teemo Burn and Elusive Burn, it's just the problem with them is that Knox's Harrowing are kind of just better than them. Also in tier 2, we forgot to mention Kinku Elusives. They're really good now because Elusive Burn is kind of bad, since none of the other tier 1 or 2 decks really do that good at stopping Elusives. Kinku Elusives specifically. Also in tier 3, we have Sea Monsters. Used to be really, really powerful of a deck. How the Mighty Have Fallen. It's gotten a nerf. Dredgers has been hit by the nerf bad. It's really sad. And just the meta is very hostile to this type of deck. This deck, Sea Monster struggles against Harrowing. So we'll get more into that later on. Now, next up, if you're new to this series, we'll go through each and every single deck one by one, starting in tier 1, going all the way to tier 3. I'll give you a short overview of why the deck is in the tier that I put it in, how to play it, very, very short overview of how to play it, and what it's good and bad against, and why it's good or bad in the current meta. So, with that said, let's go to the first one, which is Heimerdinger Vi. I don't really think I need to talk too much about this one. In all honesty, it's like, it's been a while. It's been around for a while, really. Like, if you've never played this deck, it's a pretty simple deck. Play Heimerdinger, play 3 mana spells, get a lot of 3/1 elusives, kill opponent. It's kind of easy. That's actually so key to you actually even keep Heimerdinger and sometimes Vi in your opening hand, unless you're against something really, really aggressive. It's also because it has the Ionia package, aka Will of Ionia and Deny. it's got a good matchup against everything. Its one weakness is it is a little weak to, I wouldn't say like aggro, but just lots of damage. Like, I'd say maybe Demacia mid it's a little weak to, because it doesn't have really any truly good life gain. Like, look at the list I have provided with you. There's only 2 Spirit's Refuge for life gain. So this deck actually does not want to go too late against certain decks. It wants to actually win the game and close the game out really quickly with the Heimerdinger and his turrets, specifically the elusive turrets. The other ones are good too, but purely for elusives. So yeah, good deck. Got a nerf from in the form of the Solitary Monk. Didn't hurt the deck that much. Riot has said they are looking at changing up Heimerdinger and reworking the turrets, so who knows? Maybe this deck in a week from now will just be dead or tier 3 again. Who knows? That's the beauty of card games. Next up, we've got the new boogeyman of the format, one of the most hated decks in the format at the moment, Nox's Harrowing. Oh boy. You guys thought we were done with Nox's aggro? No, Nox's Harrowing decided to show up. Harrowing was buffed from 10 to 9 mana. That's not why this deck is a thing. Specifically, Basilisk Rider was buffed to be a 5/3 Allegiance +1/+1 and Overwhelm, making him a 6/4 with Overwhelm when he hits Allegiance. 4 health is really good, as we've seen from Boom Crew Rookie and Badger Bear. Dodging a lot of removal like Get Excited, Grasp, Gotcha, etc., etc. And the Overwhelm is really good too. A 6/4 Overwhelm when on turn 4, just on curve, is extremely powerful. Coming back with the Harrowing makes this guy really strong. This deck is actually pushing out some decks. If you can't answer Harrowing in the late game, you pretty much can't go to the late game, really, in my honest opinion, against this deck. And since this deck is, I think at the moment, the most popular deck in the meta, good luck. There are a lot of various versions. Some versions don't actually run Atrocity. Instead, they've cut like maybe 1 Atrocity and 1 Transfusion for 2 Legion Rearguards to get extra 1s. And yes, it gives a little less of a high roll by being able to Atrocity a Darius or something. But a little more consistency is nice. And some don't even run Draven. They run Elise instead, who I believe is a worse choice over Draven, but whatever. All in all, a pretty standard aggro deck. The way to beat the deck is to try and keep your opponent's unit count down to 1 or less, so Transfusion's not as good, because having to play around Transfusion, you don't want to have to play around Transfusion. If you're stumbling around, your opponent will just kill you with pure aggro. And if you somehow start to stabilize, then Harrowing comes out and kills you with like a reanimated Darius and a Basilisk Rider and more. So really good deck. Very aggressive. You're gonna hate this deck if you have not been playing the game in a while. Very annoying. Next up is the deck that is also, in some people's opinion, just as annoying, if not more annoying, than Nox's Harrowing. It's personally my favorite deck of all the meta decks at the moment. We have Anivia Rekindler. I am a control boy. I love dirtling. That's pretty much it. So, pretty simple deck, really. If you've ever played like Shadow Isles, Freljord Control, it's pretty much, you pretty much know how to play this deck. Just stall and stall and stall until you can eventually get multiple Anivias on the field and just start to win that way. This deck has had a few buffs over multiple patches. Kindly Tavern Keeper's been buffed, Anivia herself has been buffed, Ruination's been buffed. Brom had a huge buff with the Poro. Honestly, this deck exists purely because of Brom getting that huge buff. The Anivia buff helps, being able to bring out Anivia on turn 6, and even if she dies, you can rekindle her right away. It's nice as well. Another reason why this deck is so good is it completely shuts down Nox's Harrowing. With all the healing it has, plus Ruinations for Harrowings, it's really good. Some variants play Hapless Aristocrats over Omen Hawks, Avalanche over Box. Some don't even run Rekindler at all and play Fury of the North instead. This version is my own personal list. I like this because the Box is really good in the mirror versus Avalanche. And I just like the Box more over Avalanche because it hits some cards that I'd like to kill that Avalanche doesn't. For example, it kills Heimerdinger, kills Crimson Disciple, and Avalanche doesn't. Good deck. Don't play this deck if you want fast games though. The games with this deck will last like 20 or so minutes per game. It's a long deck, or long games, but very fun though. And next up, let's see what we got next up. We got, I believe, yes, Karma Ezreal. Do I really need to talk about this deck too much? This deck's been in the game since pretty much the beta. Quick overview. You just sit around, kill stuff. I'm simplifying it a lot here. Sit around, kill stuff, target stuff, and just stall and stall and stall. If you've ever played a combo deck, you know the game plan. You stall and stall and stall. Ezreal levels up. Karma's leveled up. Play Ezreal. Play a bunch of spells, kill your opponent. Maybe play Karma's and then have Ezreal out on the board at the same time, and then play a lot of spells for double spells with Karma. Don't necessarily need that, but it's pretty good. Reason why this deck is so good, it's because Anivia, Anivia Rekindler, while it has a lot of healing in this game at the moment, you can't heal over 20. So this deck can easily do over 20 in one turn with Ezreal and Karma. It's really good. Plus, it's pretty decent against Heimerdinger Vi as well. Also, not a bad matchup against Draven. It's actually why I play a health potion. Some people I know play even 2 or even 3 health potions right now because of Draven, Darius, and aggro in general. I am not the biggest combo player, but I'll play it every now and again. It's a good deck. It's not that hard of a deck to play, so if you want to play it, just try it out. Just don't play your Ezreals. My one big piece of advice is, unless you have to, don't play your Ezreals onto the board if they're not leveled up and you don't have a lot of damage in hand, basically the kill in hand, unless you have to, or else you'll probably lose the game if you do that, because they'll kill your Ezreal on the spot. Next up, we got a mid-range deck. We got Brom Swain. I like this deck. It pretty much is like the old Brom Vladimir decks, but people realize Vladimir is kind of bad. And they decided to take out Vlad and put in Swain because Swain plus Leviathan's really strong. Turns out, like I said, when Leviathan was first spoiled, I thought the card was probably the best of the boats, and it seems like more and more people are deciding like, wait a minute, that card's really good. Kind of a easy to play deck in my opinion. You really just like fight for the board eventually, just not even like, you don't even need to tempo out and curve out, just fight for the board, have a nice board presence, slam Leviathan down on 8, and just win. Just hit your opponent in the face. Swain stunning stuff with a Leviathan out is pretty much the main way you win. And if you can ever somehow get double Leviathan out, yeah, you're probably already winning. As for the spells, you know, your standard suite of just good spells like Transfusions and Furies and etc, etc. Ravenous Block is also really good in the meta. So, you know, try it out if you're looking for a fun mid-range deck that, in my opinion, you actually have to think compared to other mid-range decks. One of which we might actually see coming up here. We got Bannerman. Oh boy. I know I just insulted a bunch of Demacia players out there, but come on, Demacia players. Your Demacia mid Bannerman's a little easy to play in my opinion. I went with this version to talk about over the various other versions. There are a lot of other versions. There are more aggressive versions that play Lucian Misfortune and Senna as well. For that package, there are more scout versions that play Misfortunes, and they play also the Moose, the 5-mana 5/5 Moose, whose name Greathorn Companion I think is the name. There are also versions that play all Demacia cards with Garen and Zed as the one non-Demacia card, or 3 of course. But I went with this one because I feel like it just encapsulates the spirit of Demacia Mid. If you haven't played Demacia Mid and you somehow weren't here when Demacia Mid was terrorizing everything, quick overview. This is the kind of curve out deck. 1 drop on 1, 2 drop on 2, some kind of 3 on 3, 4 drop on 4, 5 drop on 5. Throw in some scouts every now and again. Even if you whiff on a turn and you play like a 1 on turn 2 or a 2 on turn 3, it's fine. You have Rangers Resolves and single combats, and back-to-back is combat tricks too. So even if you miss out on actually using all of your mana for a turn, it's fine. I know some lists like to play all 3 Rangers Resolves. I think it's a little overkill. I think 2 is good at the moment, though. Some lists don't like to play back-to-back at all. Some lists don't play Cytheria. There's a lot of variation you can have here, though. So, if you're looking for just a easy-to-play deck, if you're trying to learn the game, or you just want to play like some kind of like easy-to-play mid-range deck, that, in my honest opinion, does actually have some strategy and a lot of in-depth thought processes at the very top level to try and eke out that little like that extra 1 and 2% win rate. This does do that, like when to play Genevieve, when to play Relentless Pursuits, etc., etc. Still, though, not my style, but maybe it's your style. Go for it. Next up, though, we got TF Ezreal, the Ezreal deck I like more, and probably my favorite Ezreal deck compared to Ezreal Karma, just because I like Riptide Rex. Pretty fun deck. I got a nerf recently in the form of Black Market Merchant getting nerfed to a 2-1 instead of a 2-2, and then Pilfered Goods became a 3-mana card over a 2-mana card, but it did get a buff with Petty Officer becoming a 3-2 instead of a 3-1, so, you know, that's nice and all. But this deck, you can't play it like Ezreal Karma. You usually will not be able to do actually 20 damage in one turn with an Ezreal. Look at the spells. There's not that many spells. There's a lot of followers. This deck kind of fights for the board. It needs to do a little bit of chip damage. Ezreal is kind of a backup win con in all honesty. The reason why you play Ezreal over something like Gangplank, if it's a backup win con, is because between Make It Rain and Riptide Rex, Ezreal is super easy to level up. And honestly, you'll probably be playing Ezreal for like around half of your games to finish off your opponent. But if you play Riptide Rex to clear your opponent's board, you're probably already winning the game. Fun deck. I really like playing it every now and again. Not that good in the current meta, but depending on how the upcoming balance patch shapes out, this deck is probably going to be good again. Next up, though, we got Kinku Elusives, or just Elusives. This deck, I hate this deck. Not because I hate how it plays. I just hate playing against it because, yuck. It always bullies the decks I like to play. Deck is old. Deck's really old. It's been around here forever. Some people have been playing Fury of the North nowadays over Elixirs and Twin Disciplines. The reason people are playing Concussive Palm nowadays, though, is because of Knox's Harrowing Aggro and Basilisk Rider specifically to slow down their aggression and basically just keep cracking in with their elusives. Still, though, it's a good choice. Very popular with tournament players because of how tournaments are arranged with bans and such. So, very good deck also for newer players. That might be another reason why you might see it a lot on ladder, especially lower ladder, I'd assume, because the only champion you need is Zed, and in all honesty, you can play this deck without Zed, and the only epic here is Windfairy Hatchling. I'm pretty sure that's the only epic. And also, you start out the game with 2 Zeds, if I remember correctly. So, very nice starter deck that's actually very solid in the meta as well. Tier 2. Some even argue it's Tier 1. I honestly don't think it's Tier 1, but I could be convinced it's Tier 1. I think it's Tier 2. Very solid deck. How to play it. You guys have played Elusives before. Come on. Do you really need me to tell you how to play Elusives? Play Elusive, Smork. Play Elusive, Smork. Simple, right? Anyway, though, next up, we got Frostbite Mid. I used to call this Frostbite Control. People have convinced me. Just call it Frostbite Mid. As for the deck, it's a fairly old deck. It's been around for a while. Some people are playing Reckoning. Some people don't play Reckoning. Some people play Rimefang Wolf. Some people don't play Rimefang Wolf. There's a lot of variation you can have in this deck. In essence, still pretty much plays the same way. Play for the board, maybe try to curve out a little bit, win combats using frostbites and freezes because they're burst speed and your opponents can't do anything about it. It can get a good win, like a fast win out of nowhere with a leveled up Ashe. If you have a big board with, say, like Yetis and Trappers and Glory Seekers and Hearthguards with leveled up Ashe, and just attack in and your opponent can't block, and then they just take like 20 damage in one turn. It's pretty decent against some decks. The reason I think it's not that good is it does lack a little consistency, I would say, because your only source of card draw is Trifarian Assessor. So it does seem to struggle a little bit. And plus, Glory Seeker is a little fragile of a card, and you'd like to use her multiple times to kill at least 2 things, but easier said than done, am I right? Next up, we got Teemo Burn. Very sad deck. We're into the tier 3 decks. Teemo Burn, pretty much the evolution of the old Burn decks before Boom Crew and friends got the nerf. Not really much has changed here. It's still sticking around a bit because people just want to play like that kind of deck where you just throw burn and spells and burn at opponents' faces and just smork as much as possible. I don't even really think I need to talk too much about this deck. You just play burn, play units, have some damage get through with units, and then you start playing burn like Decimates, Get Excited, Fervors, Mystic Shots, Cask Salesman, etc., etc. Don't play this deck. If you want to play aggro, just play Darius Draven, Noxus Harrowing instead. Or Kinku Elusives even. Just ignore this deck. Let this deck die, everyone. Next up, we got what was one of... It still is, but what was one of my favorite decks to play. This deck has kind of, not to make a pun, but it has gone off the deep end in terms of viability. We got sea monsters, whatever you want to call them. Losing a lot of good matchups, so Maokai milling your opponent doesn't really come into play as much anymore. Not having good ways to deal with a big board of stuff, like a harrowing board. It's decent against Anivia Rekindler because of Devourer and Nautilus champ spell, like Riptide. But even then, it's not that good because Anivia Rekindler players usually, unless they had to play Anivia, are smart enough to hold Glimpse Beyond to play in response to Devourer, so their Anivia doesn't actually get obliterated. Because Anivia getting obliterated doesn't count as Anivia dying for Rekindler, which is why Sea Monsters is a decent counter against that deck. Problem is, it's kind of weak against Noxus Harrowing, it's kind of weak against Heimerdinger Vi, and it's kind of weak against Karma Ezreal. 3 of the tier 1 decks. So, very sad. Its core is still strong, and I could see this coming back to tier 1 in the future with maybe a new set and more Sea Monsters or just newer cards, but for now, it needs a specific meta for there needs to be a specific meta for Sea Monsters to be viable. But who knows? Maybe in the next meta with the next balance patch, they'll get a pity buff or something, and Sea Monsters will make it to tier 2, even tier 1. Who knows though? And last but not least, probably least though, we got Elusive Burn. This deck has fallen off a lot. This deck actually falling off a lot has made it so Kinku Elusives can rise to some prominence, because this was actually this deck was actually a really good deck to beat Kinku Elusives, because thanks to the burn package they could easily outrace Kinku Elusives, and they could block Kinku Elusives because they play their own Elusives. Now though, it's kind of showing off its Frankenstein-ish parts in that it's not really a burn deck and it's not really an elusive deck, and it's starting to hurt itself because it's not really knowing what it's trying to do. Also, the Solitary Monk nerf did not help out the deck either. So yeah, I don't really know what kind of deck this deck wants to play against, except for Kinku Elusives. Like, it can't really race Noxus Harrowing anymore because of the Basilisk Rider buff. The Basilisk Rider is just too hard to race. So, very sad, but honestly, I'd say it's better than Teemo Burn, though, at least. And with that is all the decks we have in my tier list. Obviously, there are some decks out there, like various Lux decks, like Lux Karma, Lux Swain, etc., that I didn't go over, that in my opinion are just not prominent enough to put on the tier list, but are still fun to play. If there's any deck that you think I could have mentioned that I didn't talk about, leave a comment down below as well. I hope you all enjoyed the video, though. If you did, please be sure to leave a like or a comment down below. And if you guys want to keep up with all the Runeterra content on my YouTube channel, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, if you want to catch me playing some Runeterra. You can go and check me out on my Twitch TV account, twitch.tv/Zenaton. I play Runeterra there pretty much every single day. Anyway, though, that all said and done, thank you all again once more for watching this episode, and until I see you guys in the next video, bye!